But may I ask you, is there a great difference between the top of the world and the bottom of the world?
There is. Now, the North Pole is the center of an ocean 10,000 feet deep. The South Pole, the center of a plateau 10,000 feet high. The North Polar Sea is surrounded by continents that are slightly frozen. The Antarctic continent is surrounded by a belt of ice, frozen seas of at least 1,200 miles thick. Now, the south is a plateau. It gets, in some places, 14,000 feet up. I've been over areas about 13,000, and it's a little bit chilly up there. So there's that big difference between the top and bottom of the world. The North really isn't very cold up there on the Arctic Ocean.
One of the arguments people say about flat Earth is, well, that's stupid. People would fall off the edge. Well, not really. Just do a Google search. Go on Google and search for coastline of Antarctica. And you're going to see that the coastline of Antarctica consists of 200 and 300 foot ice walls. No one's fallen off of anything. You know? And then you see depictions like that where a dude peeking under the firmament. You know, these are ancient depictions right there. So, you know, I'm really intrigued by all this. More Antarctic expeditions follow after Shackleton. After World War II, the nations, especially Germany, Russia, and the United States, become literally obsessed with Antarctica. Now, a big part of that was supposedly, after World War II, a lot of the Nazis went down there and supposedly set up shop in Antarctica. So we have this character, Admiral Byrd. Enter Admiral Byrd.
Our very distinguished guest for this evening is Admiral Richard E. Byrd.
The North Pole used to be a no-man's land, but these are the days when, by buying a ticket on a commercial airliner, you can fly across the North Pole and drink a cocktail at the same time. Admiral Byrd, you've been to both the North Pole and the South Pole. Is there any unexplored land left on this Earth that might appeal to adventurous young Americans?
Yes, there is. And not up around the North Pole, because it's getting crowded up there now, because they find out it's really usable, not only to live in, but militarily. But strangely enough, there's left in the world today an area as big as the United States that's never been seen by a human being. And that's beyond the pole on the other side of the South Pole from Middle America.
While on the ball Earth model, Antarctica is said to be a continent of ice situated at the bottom of the ball from 78 degrees south latitude, it should therefore not have a perimeter greater than 12,000 miles. However, early explorers like Captain Cook and James Clark Ross, in attempting to circumnavigate Antarctica, took 3 to 4 years to do so, and clocked in the distance traveled at 50 to 60,000 miles. That's twice the circumference of the equator.
And I think it's quite astonishing that there should be an area as big as that unexplored.
That's a tremendous
So
challenge.
there's a lot of adventure left down at the bottom of the world.
He is assigned a whole fleet of battleships and all kinds of stuff to go down to Antarctica, presumably to go look for Nazis.
Admiral, an expedition to which I believe you're the advisor is now en route. What is that expedition doing?
Well, that's the icebreaker Atka, and it's a reconnaissance expedition. It's going down to the South Pole area to make certain observations and to look for some bases.
However, if you look into Admiral Byrd, prior to that, he became famous for declaring that he had gone inside the Earth, inner Earth, Agartha, through the North Pole. Okay, here's somebody with a lot of credibility, medals and decorations and rank, describing taking a plane up into the North Pole and going through a hole in the Earth and finding inner Earth.
May I ask you, is there a great difference between the top of the world and the bottom of the world?
There is. Now, the North Pole is the center of an ocean 10,000 feet deep. The South Pole, the center of a plateau 10,000 feet high. The North Polar Sea is surrounded by continents that are slightly frozen. The Antarctic continent is surrounded by a belt of ice, frozen seas of at least 1,200 miles thick. Now, the south is a plateau. It gets, in some places, 14,000 feet up. I've been over areas about 13,000, and it's a little bit chilly up there.
This is a set of encyclopedias I have. They're Encyclopedia Americana. This is volume 2. It's the A's. What we're going to do is look at what it says about Antarctica. These, just remember, this is a 1958 edition. Okay, this was before the Antarctic Treaty was signed. They did flights, and it says, these flights prove the inland areas to be featureless in character, with a dome 13,000 feet high at about latitude 80 degrees south, longitude 90 degrees east. Okay.
So they call it Operation High Jump. Well, that just makes sense. Operation High Jump. Well, if you go to Antarctica, 200 to 300 foot high walls. You got to jump over it. So they call it Operation High Jump. So I started looking into all that. This is where it got really interesting.
Now, with the tinfoil hat on, playing conspiracy theory here, the flat earthers are claiming, and I think it's a reasonable claim, that, you know, if that model is true, then we know we have a circle, the circle of the earth as described in the Bible, surrounded by Antarctica, the outer rim, that has a 200 or 300 foot ice wall, cliff, that keeps everything in, hence Operation High Jump. You got to get over that, right? So it looks like, at least from the flat earther perspective, that probably during Operation Deep Freeze, they may have found the edge of the dome, presumably anywhere from 800 to 1,200 miles inland from the coast. Then everybody pulls out, signs this treaty, says nobody can go back except under the express guidelines of the international community that signed the treaty. So then all of a sudden the United States and Russia engaged in these high altitude nuclear tests, and the United States calls theirs Operation Dominic, within which we have Operation Fishbowl. Now, hold that thought. This is all happening, if you go and look on the Operation Dominic entry, you see the different dates. We're 1962. This is the early part of 1962. We're talking May. I mean, look at all these bombs going off. 25 April, 1962, 27 April, 2 May, 4 May, 6 May, 8 May, 9 May, 11 May, 11 May, 12 May, 14 May, 19, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is all before President Kennedy's "Let's go out in the space" speech.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills.
So they start launching high-altitude nuclear bombs, and if you look at the videos on Operation Fishbowl and Starfish Prime and all those high-altitude tests, I mean, it looks like they're hitting something up there. I mean, at least from a conspiratorial tinfoil hat-wearing perspective, that's what it looks like. Now, this is what blew my mind. You can read more on all that if you'd like, to get caught up to speed on what's going on there. So I go to Lubbock, and I'm doing this conference out there at Jared Cressman's father's church, Pastor Dan Cressman, and we get to talking about this whole issue of the flat earth stuff. And he goes, "Do you know what the name Dominic means?" And I said, "No." He says, "You know, you talk about Operation Fishbowl, but check this out. I'm going to take you to, I'll put the screen share back up here. Take you to a one of those name websites. I like using behindthename.com. Look up the name Dominic, D-O-M-I-N-I-C, from the late Latin name Dominicus, meaning of the Lord. Fishbowl was part of Operation Dominic. It looks like they are sending high-altitude nuclear bombs to test the fishbowl of the Lord, i.e. the firmament.
To say to you that there will be a number of expeditions that will follow, I think, year after year. the bottom of the world because the government has really become interested.
Because we control the mind. Reality is inside the skull, Winston. We control the laws of nature. The stars are not light years, but a few kilometers away. If we wished, we could blot them out.
God created the heaven and the earth. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the water. And God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. And God saw the light, that it was good, and divided the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night, and the evening and the morning were the first day. And God said, "Let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters." And God made the firmament, and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament. And it was so. And God called the firmament.
Would you ride this into space? Well, the space tourism company Worldview seem to think so. They've completed a test flight for a passenger balloon. The test was successful, which puts this on track for a 2017 launch, making us all one small step closer to the edge of space. As long as you have a spare £50,000 and don't mind.
The company is now ready to begin full-scale testing in mid-July 2017 and hopes to bring space tourism to the masses at the end of the same year.
One small step closer to the edge of space. As long as you have a spare £50,000 and don't
The Force can have a strong influence on the weak-minded.
I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see.
I've got one that can see.
What you're doing and listen. This is not a drill.
What is it like being forced to erase your own past?
What about my past? What about my childhood?
Your entire history is an illusion, a fabrication, as it is with all of us.
My chains are